Hello to another Nucida training session, and welcome to an interesting look of Xray Enterprise for Cloud. Let's jump right into the agenda and what you can expect today. First, I will share a brief introduction of Xray Enterprise, including the key features that it offers, and then I will introduce 3 interesting new features. So, I am going to start with my presentation of the Xray Enterprise Cloud, the next level of native quality management. With Xray Enterprise, your teams will now be able to create and manage multiple versions of the same tests. This highly requested feature of our community gives you new ways to optimize test cases to cover 100% of your application's critical interactions. Also, they will be able to trigger automation directly from Xray. Now, Xblend, the producer of Xray Enterprise, offers 24/7 support, faster SLAs, and a dedicated support queue. So, the support services are improved, too. Xray already performs greatly at scale, and now for even more demanding teams, Xblend raised the API performance levels with up to 200 calls per minute and increased the Xray cloud storage capacity above 50 gigabytes. Now this brand new, high-sophisticated test management tool offers dynamic test plans, allowing you to define test plans using JQL queries or Jira filters. So Xray Enterprise is already available for Jira Data Center, and you can find it on the Plus Marketplace. Xray Enterprise always requires an active Xray license, meaning you must buy Xray and Xray Enterprise separately. Let's quickly go over some of the interesting Xray's Enterprise core features to get a closer look about the cutting-edge features. Sometimes test cases are not static. They evolve when requirements change, or improvements are made to the application under test. And even though Xray logs test specification changes in Jira history, it might not be easy to revert to a specific test case version. With Xray Enterprise, you'll have test case versioning now. You can create and manage multiple versions of the same test case, even of different test types as manual, cucumber, or generic automated, to easily track and revert changes in your test specifications. In addition, you can have multiple active versions simultaneously and execute them all independently. Next, there is the Test Case Designer, a feature that enables a new way to think about how you create and maintain your test sets. Benefiting from intelligent augmentation algorithms, test sets created by the Test Case Designer have been repeatedly proven to find more defects and find them more efficiently than unselected test sets. To this end, the tool carefully constructs combinations of test conditions to achieve the highest possible requirements coverage with the fewest possible tests. In the bottom right corner of this slide, you can see a representation of traditional test cases versus the Test Case Designer, where you are able to test 100% of the functional interactions every time with less steps. Again, avoiding wasteful repetition while systematically covering all user-specified requirements and all the application's critical interactions with the lowest possible number of tests. Moving on to remote jobs triggering. Your teams are already using Xray every day, and they have their workflows built into Jira. Knowing how important it is to simplify the way teams work, communicate, and collaborate, users can now trigger pre-configured remote jobs directly from a test plan or test execution. Meaning that, this option enables any user to trigger builds on your CI/CD tools without ever leaving Xray, thus improving testers' performance and streamlining your workflows. I am going to show you all these new features in action now. In terms you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, and let's start with test case versioning. With test case versioning, I have a new way to manage multiple test versions within the same test. So let's start by creating a new test. Here, I just type in a summary test 0001 and I just press create. That's it, the test is created. Now let's just go to the test, see the details, and so far, all is the same. So I haven't changed anything on the test itself. But as you can see here on the right side, the default version, the version 1, is already created. What does this mean? So let's keep adding some tests as I normally do. Test step 1 and expected result, OK. And a new step, the step 2, with the same expected result, and another new test step, the step 3. Again, so far all is the same, nothing new here. But if I click this option here, you can see that the system is creating this as version 1, which is default test and manual type. So if I now create a new version, what can I do here? Now, I can type any naming that I want for the new version. Let's call it just version 2 webinar, and I can copy from what I already have on version 1. So let's just press create. And as you can see now, I already have 2 versions of the test. Of course, I can go into version 2 and create a 4th step, for example. So, I am going to type in step 4 and press create. Thus, on this version I can see that I have 4 steps. But if I go back into version 1, I still see the 3 initial steps. So, this is the test case versioning working. Now, you can have within the same test key multiple types or multiple versions of this test. Furthermore, let me show you that I can create a 3rd version, and I will copy from version 2. Okay. So here it will be version 3 webinar, press create, and here it is. I have a 3rd version, and what I can do here, I can change the test type. So for example, if I want to do so, I can change to cucumber test type, and then I can define all the scenario here. As you can see, the system will create version 3 with the test type cucumber automatic test. Going back into version 2, I still have the manual version, so you can have multiple test types within the same test. Xblend added this interesting feature on top of existing tests where you can establish multiple versions and manage all these. How would the system select which version to use in terms the tester would not define the requested version? In that case, the system would select the default version, and you can see it here. This will be the version that the system will use. Every time that there is automatic adding or adding to a test plan or to a test execution, the system by default will select the default one. Of course, I can change that. For example, if I want version 2 to be the default one, I just select here and set it as default. So, this one will be the one that Xray will use when adding, for example, to a new test plan or a new test execution. On top of that, what I can also do, I can add this test to a test run. So, if I click here on test runs, I can select to execute in, and let's create a new test execution. Here you can select what version you want to add to that test execution. So for example, let's use version 2, which is the default one now, and as soon as I press create, the system will create the test run and, again, adding the test version I have just selected. So, version 2 has 4 steps, and here the 4 steps are available. Let me just go back in the test that I just created. I also have the Xray history where you can see all the changes to all the versions that I've done. So, I can see here that these were the changes to version 1. Then I have added the second version and then version 3. You can keep track all versions with all respective changes that the users did. So you can check here per version, and the system will filter out and just show us the changes that have been done for a specific version. On top of that, if you find that you have a lot of versions and you want to clean and manage a bit all the available versions, you can just go here, manage the versions, and here on this display you can set as default, archive, and delete versions. If the test versions have been added to a test execution, the system will keep a copy for the test execution or test run, so you can still archive or delete here on the version. The main goal here is to be able to have multiple versions of the same test within a test key and not having to create multiple versions as our software or our process keep evolving and you need to generate new versions of the tests. So this is test case versioning, giving users all the managing power to their tests. Let's move to the second feature that I want to demonstrate, which is the test case designer. So, the test case designer is a new way for Xray users to be able to create model-based test scenarios, which then they can synchronize and make changes to the original model, which are reflected on the fly to Xray. So as soon as you install Xray Enterprise, you will start seeing the test case designer menu option here on the left, and the integration is seamless. So, the user authentication is provided by your own Jira. So as soon as you press that option, you will be taken to the test case designer. The first time that you enter the test case designer, you won't have any models, but I have here some samples that you can click. Hence, you can view the model and, if you want, you can also create it as a new model. So, you can then make your changes. But concerning this demonstration, let's start from a new model and, Again, you can have as many models as you want. To save time, let's not start by creating one model from scratch. In fact, I have here multiple ways to start a new model. Thus, you can do that by importing some files for examples. By the way, you can import from Excel sheets if you follow that structure, or you can also do that by importing a mind map. That is basic and default. And actually, let's start by adding an easy mind map. Let me just show you something like this, which you can try to create in collaboration with your entire team. Thus, you can set up the initial mind map file and then you can import it easily straight into the test case designer. So, let me just select the OPML file here and call it webinar. Then, I just click create and the system jumps straight into the first step of the model definition, which shows the parameters of course. As you can see, the system imported all parameters that were found on the mind map file. Now, you can make all the needed changes. Just one extra option, that you can edit all these presented values. These are the so-called expanded values, which you can also expand and have value expansions. Okay. So for example, there are two MacBook Pro models with and without touch bar. Okay, you can update this as you want. We also give the option to do this within the Xray bulk mode. So, it's a text-based editor where you can copy, paste, make changes on the fly and the system will reflect all of this into the mentioned parameters. One thing to notice is that the system also allows ranges. For example, if you are adding 8 ranges, you can just define between A and B, so the system will generate all the numbers in between randomly. So this is step 1 on the parameters definition. Step 2 is to define the model-based rules, which can be given to the system in 2 ways, by the constraints or by the forced interactions. Concerning the constraints, you can create valid constraints or invalid constraints. So, values are parameters that can be placed together or cannot be never matched. And to create that is as easy as saying, for example, I don't want Microsoft Surface to be matched with Mac OS and the system will create on the fly that unbound constraint. The same way you can say, okay, I want the Google to be always bound with or create the constraint between Google Pixel and Android. And of course you need to tell the system the directions left to right, right to left, or both ways. For this demonstration, let's use both ways and the system is already calculating and of course it will display here to the user all the constraints that have been created. Besides of that, I have the option to do this in bulk mode, so you can create as many constraints as you want. And IntelliSense is inbuilt here, where, when you start typing, the system assists you to create your desired rule by including additional rule information. Let me just discard these changes. So step 2 is one of the rule types that I have, which is the constraint. I can also make sure that for our model I want some scenarios to always be tested or to always be added as an output of the model itself. And for that, I can use the forced interactions and it's as easy as saying, I always want the parameter, for example the browser parameter with Safari to be added to the output of this model. You can also create as many as you want and import from CSV files or Excel sheets. You can also input to the system, define the expected outcome of this and let me just select. Okay. This is one of the 2 options that I have for the rules, then step 1 parameters, step 2 rules. Now I am ready to start generating our scenarios. And here is where the system will not only generate all the possible interactions that I can have, but also optimizing the best code or test coverage in relationship to the minimal possible number of tests being generated. As you can see here, I am just using 2-way interactions or pairwise testing, and the system is already telling us that he is only proposing to create 56 scenarios out of almost 2,000 interactions possible. You can also see how the system is calculating this. From now on what you can say is, I'm okay with these results. So let's freeze these scenarios. What the system will do as soon as I click here freeze is, that all these scenarios will be created as forced interactions. So imagine the system has made one proposal you accept. Hence, this is our base scenario now. So to say, this base model is always kept. Meaning, if I go back into the parameters and I just add a new parameter here like color with the parameter content black, gray, and blue. If I add this new parameter, the system will reflect this on the fly to the mentioned scenarios. But of course, as you can see, the ones in blue are the ones that were frozen, so the system only adds this one here on the top for one of the colors that I have selected. Okay. So I kept the base scenario, the base model, but if I do any change, the system only reflects the things that have been added. That's it. So going back into the scenarios, what I can also do here is telling the system that I don't want two-way interactions. I want mixed strengths and interactions. So with this option I can say which values or parameters I want to pair and how many of them. So I can say I want three-way, which means triple-wise testing between device, operating system, and browser, and two ways between protocol and network, which is based on pairwise testing. So, if I reapply, the system will reflect all these changes and recalculate all the scenarios. As you can see, there was an increase to 78 scenarios out of 2,100 possible scenarios. Okay. I can make and push the interactions to whatever level I want. For the sake of the demonstration, let's go back to two-way scenarios and two-way interactions. So, I have less scenarios. That's it. I have everything the system needs to create now. The scripts and the scripting part defines the automatic and manual tests. You can define both. By the way, you can define automatic tests based on the Cucumber or the robot framework. The manual tests are organized by test steps. So let's see that happening. Here, I have a gherkin automation, and what you can do here is just complete this with whatever formulas or expansions that you want to add to the gherkin type, and the system will reflect this on the fly. Here on the right, I have selected all the devices. Here on the left, you can see now that you have the touch bar, the iPhone 7, the Surface, all of them will be included here. Okay. Let me just save this, and the same for the manual test. Concerning the manual test, you can just add as many test steps as you want. Turn on the PC is step 1, then step 2 represents the make sure screen is on action. Again, you can add as many steps as you want. One extra option that I have here is that I can add expected results per step, but even that expected result can be based on a validation. So for example, I can add when the browser is Internet Explorer 11, I are on Microsoft browser, okay. And I just add this. What does this mean? As you can see here, this expected result is in red. So it means that the selected row is not Internet Explorer. So, this expected result will not be added. If I move over to the second row, now, it is turning to green, meaning that it will be added to the output of this step as an expected result. Okay. Again, I just went through the way that I can generate all the automatic and manual tests. All the steps and all the interactions that you can add to each one of these scripts. Everything is done. I have my model ready. What I can do now is some analysis, and I have here the test coverage matrix, where I can see on the fly which tests the system has selected, why were they selected or why were they not selected. As you can see here in black, it's saying due to the invalid constraint that I have created. This test was not added, and you see the red ones. They are not selected because the system is not considering that they are adding more confidence or coverage by adding them to the output. But I can check by moving left or right which tests the system is selecting as I move the slider to the right. The same, if I move to the left, the system will tell us how many tests are not being considered, as well as for the coverage graph, where you see the percentage of test coverage. As long or as I increase the number of tests that I am executing. So, if I go into 56 tests, I am at 100% test coverage. If I go below, the system will tell us that just by doing, for example, 18 tests, I will reach about 80% of test coverage. Then this is just a brief analysis that the system is displaying to the users. Concerning our test model, I also have the review and the scoreboard. The scoreboard helps me to enrich the test model. For example, the system is telling me, well, you have no notes to this model. So, if I am working with other colleagues, I might want to add some notes letting them know what is the status of the model so far, and let's do just that. So this is a draft version. And as soon as I create the note, you can see here on top that everyone with access to this model will see that this is in a draft version. So, if I go back into the scorecard, I can see that the validation is already checked. Okay, so this is just a way to make sure that our model is in good health and that everyone can input and give their inputs to the model. We started from a mind map, right? So, I made some changes. I add one parameter. I can also see in real time all the changes that I did to this mind map file. And if you want, I can then export in the same way to an image or OPML file. And as you can see here on the color, I already have the black, gray, and blue. Okay. Then what else do I have now? I have the entire model ready. Now, it's where the magic happens. I can export this to Xray so that all the tests will be created on Xray. So I just need to adjust the test strength. So let's keep the two-way interactions. I can define the test name and the test description. I need, of course, to select the Jira project of this webinar and the test type. Let's select manual, and I have also two options here, where I can create a test set and I can also create a test plan to help us find all the tests that have been created. Then I just press synchronize and the system will start by using the API generating all the tests on Xray. Of course, that one thing that I can do is also then make changes to the test model and, again, rethink and update the existing issues that have been created. Now that the synchronization is complete, I can go here into the sync option and I see the status success. Therefore, it has managed to create all the tests and I can just click this label and the system will redirect us back into Jira with Xray. You can see here all the tests that have been created. Okay. On top of that, what can I also try to find? If I just remove this and I select the test plan type, I will see here that this is the test plan that the system created automatically with all the tests that the system had generated before. If I added one of the tests, I could see that the system has created all the steps, all the preconditions, everything that I created on the model. So, what else do I have? If I go back into the mentioned model, I can check the revisions. The revisions are very important. Every time I are making changes to the model, the system is creating these revisions. So, for each one of the revisions that have been created, I can go and create a new model from this version. I can revert to this model version, or I can just download this version of the model and then, for example, if I revert into this version, the system then will enable me to resync again with all the changes or with all the revert of the changes that I did until now. So this is the power that I have by using the test model, where I can fine-tune the model and resync everything back into Xray. Thus, you will have all your tests updated on the fly. Again, this is a new way to manage your test sets on your test plans to make sure that all the changes that you require to do to the model are easy and then reflected on the fly to Xray. This is the test case designer. The last feature I want to present today is the remote jobs trigger. So most of the companies today have integrations with CI/CD platforms. I have the need to generate builds when I start our testing phase. I have the updated build, or even previous versions, or specific versions, that I are doing our tests, and to trigger those builds. Until now there were a couple of ways you could do this, but it always means that you need to leave Xray to trigger some scripts to generate those builds. With this new Xray Enterprise feature at project level settings, you can control your test environments. It means that this configuration can be done once, and you can add here as many configurations as you want and then trigger them within the tests, or the test plans themselves. To add configurations, first you just need to select which CI/CD platform you are using. Right now, Xray Enterprise supports out-of-the-box Jenkins, Bamboo, GitHub, GitLab, and Azure DevOps, and the configuration is rather easy to do. You just input all the settings for your CI/CD platform, your job name, and you can also have parameters, right? So, it's key value parameters, you can use your own. You can input them here, but the test management tool also provides a couple of predefined parameters. For example, to send to your CI/CD platform the user or the issue key that is triggering the build, the tester requires to do the tests. Of course, several build configurations can be managed. So, once you have this set up, and actually I do have here one for Jenkins. Here I go. Let me just refresh this. All good, and it's waiting for the triggers. Okay. So if I now go back into, for example, the test plan I just created by using the test case designer, you will see that I have now this option here to trigger the build. This option will display the configurations that I have set it up and is as easy for the tester, for example, to go here, click the trigger, and that's it. The build will be triggered, and let me be fast. Here on Jenkins. Actually, I was too late that the build has already beat them. Let me repeat this to try to see this happening in real time. So, if I trigger the build here and I quickly go into Jenkins, I will see here this pane. Here I go, it's pending. It's doing the build right now and it's done. So, the output can also be included directly on Xray, meaning that you never need to leave Xray just to have the results from the test build. In a nutshell, this is a way for the user never need to leave their Xray instance and prepare everything that he needs, or to trigger the build with the test results that can be then injected directly into Xray results. This is Remote Jobs Trigger. So these were the three new main features: test case versioning, test case designer, and remote jobs trigger, all included on this new Xray Enterprise Cloud Edition. And there are many other features also included on Xray Enterprise, and Xblend will keep adding more and more features. Thus, stay tuned because I will keep you updated with the latest information. In terms you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up. Happy testing and see you next time.